in a weird situation being COVID. So yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to present. This will be recorded as well, so feel free to have a look at it later on to get other tips and to sort of research it again. A little bit about Greenwood. So we're a renewables company based in Abbotsford in Melbourne. We're a team of 35 people. We're all in-house. So we do the site visits, we do the engineering, the design work, the installation. We have 5 leading hand A grades and a chief A grade who will install the system and commission it. Furthermore, we do our own testing and we also have our own PVDBs, which are a protection board, secondary protection board called Grid Safe, which is a market-leading product that the solar industry use to prevent, fail-safes and stuff like that from happening, that we've developed our own technology. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. We did 25,000 odd panels in terms of solar installations last year as a company, which totals about 8.5 megawatts in technical talk, but we'll go through what all that means today. The essence of what this is about today, as what Lizzie said, is for you guys to really get a core understanding of what it is that we do and how we can benefit you guys as a company to, enhance your profits by reducing how much energy you waste. It's fundamentally it. The other key component of what we do is training. So Veli, who's to my right, your left probably, is our head training officer. So he travels around Australia educating businesses on how they can really, harness the energy of the sun, but also figure out a way that they can reduce their energy costs. Solar is one component of what we do. It's not the be all and end all, where yes, we're a solar company, but we're also in the renewable energy management sector, meaning you might have clapped out old pumps that are costing you an arm and a leg and pushing up your demand charge. We may look at double glazed windows, all these sort of 1%ers, which can have a huge bearing on your business long term. And that's really the fundamental aspect of what solar is and what it is that we do. We're not a get in, get out sort of company. We'll see you later. We'll just install solar and see you later. We're here for the long haul. We're here for the partnership and we're here to educate more so than anything, is to sort of go through exactly the ins and outs of how a system works, understanding your bill and sort of, then figuring out if solar is viable for you. Now, we in partnership with Mansfield's propagation nursery with Vhat down there, and he has a 100 kilowatt system on his roof, which is reaping the reward of an investment that is paying itself back in spades, probably literally actually, because he's buying machinery, and we'll go into that down the track as to what it is, that's been of benefit for him. Solar is a it's a beast. It's difficult sometimes to get your head around, but what our core message is today is to make that as easy as possible. So Veli will lead the presentation and drive all of the slides and stuff like that. As what Lizzie has indicated, ask away the questions. Paul, good day, by the way. I can see your question down the bottom. We won't have microphones on, but feel free to shoot a question through. We'll see it pop up and then we can answer it basically in real time. I think the Zoom chat, when you actually send a message, it takes about 30 seconds for it to come through. But we want this to be fun. We want it to be fairly energized without being crazy. COVID with, sitting in front of screens and stuff like that can be pretty mundane. We don't want it to be that way. We want to try and, give out as much information as we can for free. Basically, without further ado, I'll pass you over to Veli, who, is in charge of our training and who's CEC accredited in on-grid and off-grid systems, to go through how Greenwood can help you guys with your energy costs and look at solar as a alternative to grid power. So over to you, Veli.
Thanks, Andrei. A little bit about myself. I've been involved in the renewable energy industry since 2002. I've also got a background in conservation land management. I live in the patch for anyone who's up there, because I know what a interesting area the Dandenong Ranges is in regards to horticulture, Sylvan, Monbulk, etc. I worked at Devon Tube Stocks, for those who know that name, in Monbulk, propagating damn hard work for about a year or so. I own an ex-nursery. The family, we moved up to the hills about 7 years ago. and bought, for the guys who know, the ex-Knoxbrook site. So yeah, I have a really passionate interest in horticulture, and I really see that there's a very obvious relationship between horticulture and the loads imposed on a site such as a greenhouse and renewable energy. For those also who are interested, we have looked long and hard for the last year or so at the relationship between a new kind of horticulture that has only become legal in the last year or so, and that is the medicinal cannabis area. The loads imposed on these medicinal cannabis sites are massive, and renewable energy is a really great way to address those. Personally, got some nice garlic growing at the moment. We put them in at the end of April, so they've come up really well. Tomatoes did really badly, so yeah, I love all things horticultural, and I love all things renewable. So we'll make a start now and get stuck into it. And excuse me as I lean forward a bit. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, click on here. Nursery and energy management and commercial solar. Now, isn't that a lovely clean greenhouse? That shot is courtesy of Mansfield's, and as I've always said about Mansfield, you can basically eat your dinner off the pathways. It's a very clean situation out there. And you can see in that particular slide, they've got some ventilation, and I think they may have a heated beds system there. So what we'll be talking about today is some basics. So I'm not sure about the understanding of the participants today, but we will talk about what a kilowatt hour actually means, and what kind of energy loads does a nursery experience, and what types of energy we're talking about, what are you actually paying for on your bill, when do these loads occur, renewable energy and nurseries, the connection, how much you are spending on electricity now, what kind of energy management strategies are available. And that's a really key point. And how do you assess your actual loads, how to maintain productive process, but also reduce costs. No use saying, oh, reduce irrigation times, or when, you know, obviously this has a direct bearing on your actual productive output. Steps to create your own energy management strategy, quite simple steps, and commercial solar systems and nurseries. So let's start from the beginning. So on your bill, and we all get our electricity bills, death, taxes and rising electricity bills is what I always say. What are you actually paying for on your bill? Obviously there's a service charge, and that's a daily charge that the retailer imposes for actually supplying electricity to your property. The consumption charge is where you are charged for every kilowatt hour used, and it may be 25 cents per kilowatt hour, it may be 30, it may be a different rate at different times, depending on your particular agreement. I know where I am, it's a flat rate. We cannot access an off-peak tariff. And by off-peak tariff, I mean after, say, 10 p.m. on weekdays, you're paying a lower rate than, say, between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. And on the weekends, you may be paying a lower rate. So depending on your agreement and with the retailer, you may be on a flat tariff situation or a multi-tariff situation.
If at any stage as well down the journey, we're here to help you guys as a you know, an obligation-free service. If you've got your bill and you're like, what does this mean? How does this work? I'm not entirely sure. Can we look at a different rate? We'd be more than happy, obligation-free, to have a look at said bill to see exactly what you're paying, and to be able to answer any questions on it. We are here to help. My mobile number is given out. You guys can have it, and same with Veli if he's cool with that. But didn't ask him, but too bad.
Just don't ring after hours.
Yeah, we're really here to educate you guys and to help give you a tactical advantage almost to saving on your energy bills and your costs on that side as well as solar.
So obviously it's important what you pay for on your electricity bill. An electricity bill will give you your average daily load. In other words, it'll give you a figure saying, well, for instance, you know, my particular site, my particular nursery, we're consuming maybe 300, 400 kilowatt hours a day, or it may be 50 kilowatt hours a day. And a kilowatt hour is a measure of energy. So how do we calculate that? I'll backtrack again. So again, kilowatt hour is a measure of energy, and that has a time constraint. Now, on my electricity bill, I'm paying for a service charge, as mentioned before, a consumption charge, and a demand charge, and we'll address each of those. So a service charge is fixed, as I mentioned, and it's not related to how much electricity is consumed on site. So regardless if you're consuming bugger all, for want of a better expression, energy, or a massive amount of energy, you're still going to get a fixed charge of $1.50, $1.60 per day, depending on your retailer. And now, on a side note, a commercial solar system, for instance, can't directly negate a fixed charge cost. It can negate a consumption charge, but not a fixed charge. It can do it indirectly, though, and we'll talk about that. The consumption charge is based per kilowatt hour of energy used, and as we mentioned, it's based on a different tariff situation. And then, as I said, flat tariff at our place. We did have, at our place, because it's an ex-nursery, we did have 2 meters, but as we're not running in a nursery, we just disconnected 1 meter, and we've just gone through a single phase meter. I believe the previous owners were on a flat tariff, but yeah, that's what they've said, but it's hard to know. But anyway, it's important to know, just read your bill and find out what kind of tariff you're on. Now, how is it measured? If I've got a 1,000 watt load on for 1 hour, that is 1 kilowatt hour, or 1,000 watt hours. So for instance, maybe a pump that I'm pumping continuously for 1 hour, that's going to use 1 kilowatt hour of energy. And that amount of energy equates to, as I mentioned before, 20, 25 cents, 30 cents per kilowatt hour. Look, in some cases, we've seen nurseries up to 35 cents per kilowatt hour. So it just depends. It really can vary that much. So here's an example. We've got an irrigation pump. It has a power rating of 1,000 watts, and it's on for, say, 6 hours a day. Now, this may be applicable to your situation, or maybe not. Let's say it's not an irrigation pump. You're doing, let's say, micro fogging. You're fogging your greenhouse at, say, 15 microns to keep the humidity at a perfect level for propagation. You're keeping that root zone, air zone, temperature differential looking pretty good. Whatever the case, however that micro fogging situation or that irrigation pump, whatever is running it, is it a 1,000 watt pump? If it's on for 6 hours, you're going to use 6 kilowatt hours. Here we go. 6 kilowatt hours of energy. And obviously at 25 cents, you do the math. So it's really as simple as that. You find the ratings of your appliances, whether it's a nursery load specifically or an office load, and we'll talk about that difference. And you'll be able to see exactly, well, this particular pump on average is costing me this amount. So that, excuse me, that particular slide just reiterates that as well. Simple maths, but you'd be surprised how many people get this wrong, especially electricians consuming kilowatts and kilowatt hours. So, for instance, that 1,000 watt or 1 kilowatt pump is the power rating. The energy is how long that is on for. Time and time again, I have to correct electricians on this as I go around Australia and conduct specifically training for commercial solar design, amongst other things. It's a really important thing to get correct. So another example, we'll assume you've got 5 pumps on and they're all the same size and they're running every day. Now, the reality, obviously, this is not the case. Unless you are involved in, say, soilless culture, hydroponics type situations, you're doing an NFT nutrient flow technique for, say, hydroponic lettuces, where your pumps will be on pretty continuously. Obviously, the medium in which you're growing your plants will determine how often the pumps come on and off, in conjunction with the required humidity, required ideal temperatures, especially if it's a propagation situation, and obviously ambient temperatures. These all play a role. But for this example here, we are looking at 5 pumps running every day. So they're 1,000 watts each, and they're on for 6 hours times 365 days a year at 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And the grand total for that year on pumps alone is 2,000. Let me see. I need better glasses.
2,735.
Thanks, Andrei. So straight away, you've made an assessment that this. Now, from a productive process point of view, obviously, as prudent business owners involved in the horticultural industry, you've probably sat down and worked out that every square metre of your greenhouse has a particular return, much like what Caintain does with their store space. They calculate each square metre and says, what does this return? And you do a cost-benefit analysis and say, well, look, okay, maybe I could get away with running the pumps less often to reduce my energy expenditure, but that may impact quite severely on my plant output. Now, I'm not sure, the participants out there, I'm not sure what kind of businesses you're running. Some may be growing trees in the ground, which require infrequent irrigation, especially around this time of year. Others may be up the other end, running medicinal cannabis grows, where you've got such intensive demand on the electrical infrastructure that you're running pumps and you're running your HVACs going 24/7, and most of you will probably be in between. I know this is quite basic, and for some of you may be going, oh, hang on, I know this, but I'm not sure what your level of understanding is, but it's just really important to know these basics. So forgive me for the participants who know what I'm talking about and maybe rolling their eyes at this point in time.
As a side note as well, like if there's obviously going to be a different level of education that people already know, don't hesitate to call Veli anytime during Monday through Thursday.
Yeah.
He will talk and talk and talk about horticulture and your needs and explaining how he can benefit, your overall business. He lives and breathes horticulture. He's being a bit shy about it. He loves it. So he's more than happy to talk it through. If you've got a specific question that you think might take 5-10 minutes to answer, don't hesitate to call after the meeting and talk to Veli. He'd love to hear from him.
I think what's important, and it was mentioned earlier on, what we tend to do is look at this from a holistic point of view. It is all about an energy management strategy. There's X amount of energy used on site. When that energy is used is incredibly important. What kind of energy is used is incredibly important too. I remember in some of the earlier days and some of the older greenhouses, they're using heated beds and they were using electricity, where a lot of the heated beds now have gone to natural gas or LPG and reduced their expenditure accordingly. It just depends on what kind of horticultural setup you've got. But at the end of the day, if you're growing plants, you're using energy in one form or another. Okay, we'll get on to the next slide. So you can see here, this is just a bit of a graph. I've reiterated the same thing. We're paying 25 cents per kilowatt hour. That's what it says on our bill. 1,000 watt load running for 1 hour costs 25 cents. Great, we understand that. That same load on for 4 hours costs $1. Okay, if that's 365 days a year, you do the math. So I think we've sort of covered that pretty well. Now, this is another part of your bill, and we see this a lot on the larger horticultural businesses, and also in other industries. Cold storage. We did a job for a bulb importer out in Sylvan, who actually has a cold storage facility as well, and his demand charges were quite high. And it's it's a really funny area. So effectively, it's also known as a capacity charge. So please check your bills on this one, because this is where you can be basically flogged pretty hard by the retailer based on intermittent loads. In other words, loads that come on infrequently but have a very high startup surge. And we're talking about what they call inductive loads, so large pumps, for instance. Now, a daily charge is determined by the highest power demand load observed. So, for instance, you may have 5 pumps come on simultaneously, and then they'll kick you over that edge, and you'll be charged based on that 10-second period where those 5 pumps have drawn so much energy, and the retailer says, okay, well, we assume that energy is being drawn on a regular basis. And their logic for charging these demand charges is that, well, you know, our infrastructure has to be able to cope with these infrequent amounts, and you will be charged accordingly. Unfortunately, the distributors are the powers that be. So I'll backtrack a bit. You're paying money to the retailer, and the retailer is buying money from the distributor. And in the case of Victoria, that is AusNet, Powercore, Gemina, United, and Powercore.
Yep, yeah, that's all of them. Basically, the essence of it is if you can avoid turning everything on at once, which will then spike up your demand, if you can stagger loads to start infrequently or frequently in a time scope, your demand charge will come down. They're on it. They look at it and they scour it every 15 minutes through your interval data, which we'll talk about later. But that's the essence probably of how they sting you, is through a demand charge. So, you know, we have dealt with, you know, large scale nurseries, small scale, demand charge is there for everyone. It's a matter of being smart about it, because if you just get in at the start of the day and go and turn everything on, your demand charge will spike, and that's a component of your bill that you're stuck with the majority of the year. So you just need to be aware of it. And also, yeah, if you can stagger it, then please, we encourage your operations and maintenance and facility managers to do so.
It is hard in a fully automated nursery situation where your HVAC is responding to environmental conditions inside the greenhouse. Obviously, you know, in a micro spray situation where you've struck cuttings in your preferred mix with obviously a potting mix with peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, whatever your particular mix is, the actual irrigation side of things is going to come on response to decreases in humidity or increases in temperature. And if you're running multiple greenhouses under the same nursery management software, this can result in, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 pumps coming on simultaneously. It's a hard one to get around because obviously, you know, you don't want the plants to suffer. There are systems where you can have it like a chronological startup that does reduce these surges. So the issue with a pump is this, that when it starts up, it spikes like that and then goes down to an operating current. It's that spike combined with all the other spikes of what's going on at that time and the constant loads of other loads on the nursery that contribute to the demand charge. It's a really funny area. So again, this is where energy management can really reduce your expenditure.
Yeah, demand charge is a crucial component of it.
Yeah.
The way, I suppose, that you can really harness a lower demand charge is to actively look at solar as a source of electricity for your business. If we use that consumption profile that we've got up there, where at noon it's got a peak demand charge, that's where the sun is obviously, you know, right at its tips. So by having the solar as an energy point, your demand charges technically come down because you're not required from the grid as much. So we'll go into that a little bit more later.
Yeah.
But that's where the start of your solar, you know, aspirations really begin by looking at your interval data, which we'll go over, seeing where your highest demand is, and then, yeah, figuring out if solar is correct for you. Now, obviously with loads and stuff like that and demand charges, the spike that we see on this is maybe not maybe not current with your low profiles of how you guys are running your business. A lot of companies, we deal with and have given proposals out to and got intimate details about the business structure is early morning, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., where the sun is not as prevalent. So that's something to look at actively as well.
Yeah, it's again, it all comes down to this strategy that you're looking at your businesses from the point of view that energy is being used, but when's it being used? How's it being used? Because energy has a different cost at different times of the day, especially when you start talking about the renewable energy aspect and how it can potentially address these loads. And commercial solar is not for everyone. There's some situations where, and Andrei and I were talking about this yesterday, where a site has predominantly its loads are overnight. That doesn't tend to be the case with greenhouses and nurseries. But if it is, then solar is active. Obviously, solar produces during the day, so the efficacy of a solar approach there is severely limited. But we'll talk about that later on. So again, this is demand charge, and we've basically covered this. And you can see you can get a daily demand charge to use up to this level for a full year for 10, 15 seconds a day going over that limit. It's a hard one to get your head around. It's like, let's say I've got a cut off here and this is my site consumption, and occasionally I go spike. Well, that's what they charge you on, that spike. So if you can reduce those spikes so they fall under that cut-off period, your demand charge is reduced considerably. Again, I've gone a little bit more. So what we'll do after this presentation, the presentation will be freely available as a PDF for you guys to go over in a little bit more detail. Because as I always say, you're lucky to get 10, 15% from even the best presenters. Not that we're saying that we are, but we're trying to make this as entertaining as possible. It's a pretty interesting area. Okay. Now, finding the actual flow rates of some of the larger pumps. Some horticultural businesses are running very large pumps, pumping megalitres, and especially if you're talking about in-ground trees in the early stages before they establish their roots, before they get down to that point where the tap root's gone down and accessing some decent water, or it's relying on natural rainfall. You're talking about a lot of irrigation in the early days. You're talking very large pumps. You're talking about a lot of pipe friction issues from running irrigation pipes long distances. So finding out how much a pump actually consumes in energy is a very important thing. So it's very easy with that 1,000 watt pump, but this is a bit of a different example. So you've got X amount of water, you're pumping in X amount of time, and let's say the flow rate is 58 litres a second, which is not unrealistic. There's obviously larger pumps and there's a lot smaller pumps on the market. And the pump in question has a rating of 42 kilowatts. Okay, so that's its power rating. It's not its energy rating, because energy is related to time. So how much energy is used to pump 1 megalitre of water with a flow rate of 58 litres a second? Yep, 58 litres a second. So how do we work that out? So we've got something called the calibration value. Now, for those who know their pumps, this is like second nature. For those who don't, well, hopefully we're teaching something you don't know. So there's the calculation there, 42 kilowatt over 58 litres per second times 0.0036. Lots of numbers. At the end of the day, this is a mathematical calculation to find out how much that pump is actually using energy-wise, cost-wise to pump 1 megalitre. I think we've had enough of the maths, so I think we'll go on a little bit more. Okay, more maths, sorry about this. Okay, $50.27 per megalitre to pump that water. Now, it says here the different tariffs. So, for instance, if you have access to a multi-tariff situation, maybe one of your strategies is, if you can get away with it, is pumping at an off-peak tariff situation, pumping at night, pumping on the weekends, where instead of paying your 25, 30 cents per kilowatt hour, you may be paying 16. Again, do your cost benefit analysis. And all of this, all business is about, you know, the costs versus the benefits. Now, this particular slide, so what I'm suggesting here is that if it's not feasible to pump during off-peak times, in other words, after 10 p.m. on weekdays and on the weekends, maybe this is where you can look at having this particular load addressed by a solar system. Now, with a solar system, it doesn't continuously produce the same amount of energy. In the morning, it's producing less than at 12 o'clock noon. So effectively, the shape of the graph, if you can see, is like your traditional bell curve. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, the solar is producing bugger all, but at 12 o'clock, it's at its peak production. And this is assuming the panels are facing north in the southern hemisphere. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's solar, whether it's the grid, whether it's diesel, because we know a lot of nurseries are using diesel backup situations, and some nurseries are using diesel to negate the demand charges we talked about before. Again, it's all about developing an energy management strategy. No questions so far, but feel free to ask questions at any stage. I think that the important thing to start when developing your own energy management strategy is to divide your loads. And in a nursery situation, you've got two main categories. You've got your office loads and packing shed, let's say, or the area where you may be doing your cuttings and propagation or potting up. And then you've got your nursery loads specifically, irrigation, HVAC, humidifiers, all of that, the heating side of things. Splitting those again into electrical loads and non-electrical loads is very, very important. So for instance, as I mentioned before, bottom heat by gas, natural or LPG. And then you've got your office heating, which could be a reverse cycle air conditioning. It could be an oil heater, etc., etc. It's the ability to split these loads between nursery specific and the rest of the business, and then electrical, and then other forms of energy. It really is simple when you think about it, but it's surprising how many businesses don't sit down and go, hang on a sec, what is my ratio to office loads to straight out nursery loads? What is my ratio? What is my ratio to electrical loads, to non-electrical loads from an expenditure point of view? And when you start doing that analysis, some interesting things can emerge. So step one, identify all your site loads. Split them into categories, electrical and non-electrical. Then divide into nursery specific and office loads. And then look at the ratio of specific to non-specific loads. And this is where a spreadsheet comes in handy. Excel, or look, obviously I'm not promoting one company over, but a spreadsheet. I like Excel, it's pretty good. Google Sheets is not too bad, numbers, whatever you use. Some simple simple calculations in the spreadsheet can reveal some pretty interesting information.
We'd be happy as well to analyse and have a look if you start the process of what loads and what equipment you have on site. We, you know, as a gesture of goodwill, we'd be able to have a look and go, yeah, this is, you've set it up right now, you're accurate. So you don't hesitate to send something through if you wanted us to have a look as well.
Now, the next step is to split into intermittent loads and continuous loads. So an intermittent load is something that turns off and on in response to a particular stimulus. A continuous load would be more something like the office air conditioning, reverse cycle. So at the moment, I woke up at 5:30 this morning. It was in the patch, and it was, when I got in the car, it wasn't too bad. I think it was 8 or 9 degrees. And then I got in the office at 7 o'clock and I turned on the reverse cycle air conditioner. And I like to run it quite low, and we'll talk about why that is. Well, personally, I live in the hills. I'm used to the cold weather. So 18 degrees is plenty warm enough for me. And then, so back to this, we look at the daytime, nighttime ratio. So this is all your loads during the day compared to all your loads during the night. Now, in a nursery situation, you may have your security, you'll have obviously the internet, you'll have some kind of refrigeration. On those warmer summer days when it's 40 degrees during the day and 30 at night, you will have pump loads, you will have HVAC loads as well, but they'll be less. So it's interesting to see that ratio between daytime and nighttime. So again, this is just reiterating what I said previously. Identify these loads, split them, and then identify strategies to address these loads. Now, when we start talking about office loads, this is a really interesting one because any discussion there is tempered by the concept of thermal comfort, and I'll explain what I mean later on in that regard. So, what are some of these energy management options? You've gone down the road of a simple strategy, which I've outlined over the last few slides. So what else can you do? Full energy audit of the site is one option. Installation of a renewable energy system is another option in no particular order, and more comprehensive nursery management software. As you guys know, the nursery management software these days is a long way away from what was available, say, 10, 15 years ago, and a lot cheaper. Like anything, cost-benefit analysis is required. The office. Now, got to be careful here. The people working in the office, their thermal comfort is very important. Their thermal comfort will relate to their productivity, and this is where I have to tread very, very carefully. So, but if you can, reduce the acceptable ambient temperature during winter, so set the temperature lower, increase the acceptable ambient temperature during summer, set the cooling temperature higher, and look at phantom loads in the office and reduce. Now, phantom loads used to be more of a concern years ago, but now they're not as much of a concern. But what I mean by phantom load is an electrical load drawn from the grid from an appliance that is in the off or standby situation. So, for instance, it may be a television or a screen that hasn't been turned off at the power point. Now, by themselves, they don't really count for much, but cumulatively, you've got 20 or 30 of these phantom loads, they can play a really, really big role. So it's something to have a look at, go through your office, go through what's on that doesn't need to be on. And this is a cultural thing too. It's getting people into the habit of turning things off before they leave the office at the end of the day. Screens are a classic example. Even where we work, there's certain people leave their screens on. I'm really gung-ho about turning things off. Because at the end of the day, regardless of any energy management strategies, if you can reduce consumption right from the word go without impeding that productive process, you're doing well, you're saving money right from the word go.
That's where solar is not the key answer to reducing your energy bill. That's the thing. Like, I'm sure all of you guys out there have been called and someone said, yeah, we can put solar on your roof, it'll help with your bills. That's one component of how you can reduce your energy bill. It's the 1%ers inside internally in your business, which drop your overall energy load straight away. And then you look at the solar as an alternative energy measurement. So it's just something to ponder as well.
I mean, again, and I keep on harping on about it, but everything comes down to this, cost benefit analysis. And that can be simple as a sheet of A4 paper with a line down the middle you know, pros of this particular approach to doing whatever, the cons, and it's a constant weighing. And even though I've made that sound simple, it can get quite complex when you do some, you know, in-depth analysis. Now, this is a really interesting one. This is the optimum temperatures for air conditioning. Now, I'm going to talk about Victoria, and we'll go right down to the bottom. So we'll go, say, here, and actually, we'll forget about here. We'll go here. We'll go. So that's the optimum temperature in summer in the office, 26 to 27. Now, I've been into offices when it's been 40 degrees outside and it's been like 18 degrees and people walking around in jumpers. It's quite ridiculous. But as I said before, this perception of thermal comfort really plays a big role. Now in winter, you can see the heating, they're suggesting about 20 degrees. Okay, your office may be warmer, it may be cooler. I like 18, but hey, I work in an office with other people, and it's generally a bit warmer than 18 degrees. Now, why is this important? When you start reducing or increasing temperatures, it's a non-linear relationship between how much energy is required to achieve that new temperature status. And I'll show you what I mean. And this is basically, that's the text is just coming up reiterating what I've just said. Okay, so every 1 degree drop in summer temperature can result in 10% increase in costs. So in other words, if I want to run that aircon really full bore, no matter how efficient it is, I'm going to incur a 10% increase for every 1 temperature drop. And that's quite phenomenal. Now, if it's one small office with 1 air conditioner, that's not too bad. But if you've got multiple areas, for instance, you've got, you know, a large office or multiple offices, or you've got an area where the workers are sitting down doing propagation at a table and they're just going for it, doing multiple cuttings, using the hormone, using the rooting hormone. Buddleia was one I hated, spikes, and citrus, very bad for those who understand what I'm saying. They need a good thermal temperature for themselves as well. So it may be a very big area that may be heated by an air conditioner or a blowy fan, one of those little blowy fans, which are very, very inefficient. Again, this is pretty simple stuff, but it's surprising how many businesses don't look at it to actually find out. Even if you can't reduce your costs and you're unwilling to change these temperatures in your office, it's still important to know what percentage of your expenditure is going towards the office. So if I ask you out there, what percentages of your electricity bill is spent on heating the office, most of you probably wouldn't know. But it's an important bit of information to know. Okay, so there's the cooling capacity of the actual air conditioner that we're using. Now, that doesn't mean with air conditioners, there is something that's called a coefficient of performance. So that's the actual capacity, but the output of the air conditioner may be 2.5 kilowatt. So in actual fact, their draw is 2.5 kilowatt for however long they're on, but their cooling capacity or heating capacity is higher than that, based on what they call a coefficient of performance. Getting a bit technical there, so I'll slow down. All right, so we've got in this case, we've got 1 air conditioner in the office. That's a nice looking air conditioner. Cooling capacity of this is 6 kilowatt and it's running for 8 hours a day in summer. Okay, let's say it's running flat out. It's 40 degrees, one of those horrible days in Melbourne. And we've set it for 25 degrees. And we're assuming, in this case, the cost of electricity is 28 cents per kilowatt hour. And so the cost to run, per hour to run, is 33 cents, okay? Forgive me with the maths, but I'll get to the final point. So that's costing, that 1 air conditioner is costing $963 a year. Now, if we suddenly want to run it at 21 degrees, suddenly the cost per hour goes up to 50 cents Now, our cost per year is $1,460 a year. That's an increase of 51%, which is massive, just by changing the temperature, a few degrees. So just be aware, it's a non-linear relationship between lowering the temperature in your office during summer and raising the temperature in your office during winter. So if there's 5 of these air conditioners running 8 hours a day, $7,300 at 21 degrees. At 25 degrees, $4,818. That's a difference of $2,482. Okay, substitute air conditioners for another load. It's a considerable difference. So how do we actually assess your site loads completely? From the bill that we all get from our retailer, there is an average daily load. Now, there's a question from Paul. Good question, Paul. What about an evaporative cooler with no temperature setting, but just a fan speed setting? Now, with evaporative coolers, traditionally are a lot more energy efficient than air conditioners. The only downside to evaporative coolers is that they tend not to work in very humid environments. So you'll never see one in Darwin, but down here where we have a lot of dry heat, they work really, really well. Now, yeah, in Bombog, yeah, understand, yeah, and the patch, yeah, totally understand. So what Paul has asked is, what about evaporative cooling with no temperature setting, but just the fan speed setting? Well, the fan speed set, the fan has a rating. For instance, it may be a 60 watt fan, maybe a 100 watt fan. Just a fan in speed setting. So the faster the fan runs, the more energy it will use. So look, it's a hard one without actually knowing what the specs on the evaporative cooler, but you're probably better off sticking with that evaporative cooler than looking at the air conditioners. But saying that, some of the new air conditioners are so incredibly efficient, it's not funny. Look, on that note, you reminded me, if you've got gas central heating, so you've got a gas furnace and you've got ducting, most people think that it's just a gas load, but funnily enough, those systems have very large fans in them and can be up to 600-700 watt. And funnily enough, at our place, the electricity bill is higher during the winter time than summer. But we live very, very simply at our place. So. But thanks, Paul, for that. It's good. Now, how do you assess your actual load? So the average daily load of the site available from your bill. So as we mentioned before, it might be 100 kilowatt hours, 50 kilowatt hours, 1,000 kilowatt hours. That's important from the perspective of how much energy is used on the site. But when is the energy used is equally as important. And that's when we start talking about the site's interval data. And we can get that from the retailer. The other way is site-specific metering and monitoring equipment that we will elaborate on later. Sorry.
Yep. No,
sorry, guys. Sorry about that. User error. Okay. Average amount of electricity consumed per day in kilowatt hours. Okay. Our place, where I live, really low. It's a domestic place. It's 4 kilowatt hours. Your place may be 50 kilowatt hours a day, 100, 200, 300, etc.
The essence of the interval data truly is to give you your accuracy. Power bills and looking at loads and stuff like that with small data scope doesn't give a true picture as to what Veli has talked about when you're going to use your energy. That's where you can figure out exact numbers. So exactly how many kilowatt hours you're using per day, how many you're using in the morning, during the sunlight bell curve that Veli's talked about as well. So if you're interested in a true sense of figuring out if solar's right for you, the interval data is the first step. It's obligation free. It takes us about 3 to 6 days to get it back from your retailer. We act as a third party authorised authority to act, so we can get it on your behalf. You don't have to do anything. We then come back to you with exactly what the data looks like, with an explanation as well. So you can really start to see if it's a viable, alternative to grid power as your exclusive means of generating energy.
Yeah, it's really important, this interval data, even from the perspective of.
It's the most crucial.
It really is, and it's available to everyone, and it's available through the retailer. So effectively, it's a snapshot of your site, 24/7 for at least the last year. Every 15 and or 30 minutes. It's usually 30 minutes, isn't it? In some places it's 15. So basically, what's happening at 2 a.m? What's happening at 6 a.m? What's happening at 8:30 p.m. Saturday, June the 5th? Hang on, did I say that? Whatever the date. So it takes a snapshot exactly of what's going on. And it comes in a CSV file. Look, you can make the request yourself. Some retailers are fantastic in our experience. They take 2 days. Others take a lot longer. Just depends on who you.
And the way they send the file through as well is quite cryptic. Energy retailers, whilst they want us to be a renewable society, aren't giving it to us on a platter. They don't give us exactly what we want to see. We use independent third-party software called PV Cell, which allows us to analyse that data and to see exactly how solar will correspond with that. I'm sure a few of you who are on today have seen some of the stuff that we've offered already through using PV Cell. It's the same modelling that we use for Mansfield's nursery as well to give accuracy. And further from grabbing your interval data to then putting it on PV Cell, to putting the panels up and sun comes up and here we go with the solar. It's the accuracy of the systems that we put on, which are, I suppose why we have some of the highest credentials in the industry, being ISO certified, obviously CEC accredited, that we monitor all of our systems daily. We have alerts and stuff like that come up if something potentially has gone awry or if the system's not performing perfectly or to what we claim to be the energy that we're going to output. So that's that's the sort of process, and we'll go into that a little bit in detail as well. But if you're interested in solar as a renewable energy form, interval data is 110% the first thing that we need to do to see if it's viable.
Okay. Now, with the average daily load information, it can help with a basic design solar-wise. So we're fairly accurate when it comes to assessing a site's requirements off their bill. But the interval data is what's required. And why it's required basically comes down to this. And it's a really important point. I don't know if any of you can remember back in the John Howard days when $8,000 was given to households to put solar, and they actually gave them a wonderful feed-in tariff of 66 cents per kilowatt hour. And at the time, customers were paying 20 cents per kilowatt hour to draw it from the grid, but they installed these solar systems and they were pumping it out to the grid at 66 cents per kilowatt hour. So you can imagine what energy management strategy we were advocating back then. And this is way back, 2009, 2008. We were saying effectively, during the day, if you could minimise your loads, that would be the best thing because you were getting a better return pushing your energy out to the grid at 66 cents. Because what happens with the solar, when you've got it on your system, any loads on site are first addressed by the solar. And if that's still not enough, then it automatically draws from the grid. Now, at this point in time, to feed energy back to the grid, you're getting the piddling sum, best case scenario, of about 9 cents per kilowatt hour, as opposed to directly using the solar during the day to negate your electrical loads at the rate you're paying, say 25 cents, 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And that is one of the reasons why the interval data is incredibly important. Because at the end of the day, from our perspective and experience, a business owner is looking at commercial solar with a host of other options. It's the drivers for the adoption of a commercial solar system are financial. You're looking at return on investment, payback period, all those other financial things. So for us to any system that we design, it has to be offered as a financial proposition. And as Andrei mentioned, the system that we use called PV Cell allows us to input all the site's data and then spit out, so for want of a better expression, the correct sized system that is best suited for that site. Obviously, the physical requirements of the site will dictate to how much solar we can put. If it's roof mount, how big the roof is, or if there's
ground mounts and other systems.
Or ground mounts, yeah.
So I touched on it in the introduction that we went to and installed and commissioned around 130 solar systems last year. We offer a production guarantee, which is part of what Greenwood do as a service, which we're so confident in the engineering behind it because it's all in-house. We're not putting the trust of anyone, outsourcing, as a secondary party or subcontractor. So we offer a performance guarantee that we can go into in another sort of chat off this, but it ensures that the system size that we design based on your interval data is completely accurate. Now, I touched on it before, but we know this through Mansfield's propagation nursery and through other, agri partners that we've dealt with, that the system's performing absolutely perfectly to a T, that they're getting exactly what we proposed, which is, I suppose, a little bit of a cautious thing, you'd almost say, in the solar industry valley a little bit, where, people are just slamming solar up. Yep, it'll do this, it'll do that. But we stand by the products and the performance guarantee that we do. If it doesn't meet its standards, then we offer, an additional tariff to compensate that. I can say it proudly that we've never had to do that, purely because the systems are designed in-house by our team of engineers, headed up by Dave Fulton, Head of Engineering. You're more than welcome anytime to come into our office. We're based in Abbotsford to have a chat, have a coffee, meet and greet. Got a few guitars here too, so play a bit of Van Halen and Metallica if you're fit to. So yeah, we encourage a partnership is really what we want to do. And anytime you want to come in to meet and greet, or I can come out, I'm on the road a fair bit, and Veli's more than happy as well. We can come out. I know I've come out and seen a few of you guys already. Yeah.
Especially if you're up near the Dandenong Ranges.
It's a good part of the world.
Yeah. It's nice and close to home too.
Yeah. So we'll move on.
We'll move on. Okay, so we've gone over this interval data, multiple snapshots of energy consumption on site, half-hour increments, if obtained from your smart meter. And this is an interesting one because interstate, when I talk about this, there's a lot of sites that don't have smart meters, so we have a different method of obtaining that information. And of course, an example of what's been consumed at 8 p.m, 4:30 a.m, as I mentioned. So 24 hours a day, half-hour increments, 365 days a year. Now, I mentioned this before. When you export energy from the solar, you're not getting the same rate for what you're paying to import energy from the grid or what you're negating by using the solar directly. So the solar system is installed at your business. The sun comes out, the solar starts producing, there's a load on, and the load the solar automatically addresses that load. If the solar produces more than those loads, it goes out to the grid. If the solar produces less than those loads, the solar basically says, hey, grid, give me a hand. And it works in conjunction, all done automatically. So that's for the people who don't know how solar works. That's one of the most common questions. How does solar work? The next common question is, if the grid fails, and I know for the for the businesses up in the Dandenong Ranges. We get brownouts and blackouts pretty damn frequently up there, and yeah, no comment. But no, the solar will not produce during a blackout unless there's an energy storage component, which is an additional thing we can chat about, not in this forum. It's a bit more complicated. As I mentioned before, it is a financial consideration. There are environmental considerations that can be traded upon, but the driver really is this financial. I'm a business owner. What do? Do I invest my money in solar? Do I buy more equipment? Do I hire another person? Do I spend more time on marketing? You've got a host of options and you'll weigh up the pros and cons of each. So how does the process actually work? What happens if, as a business, you're saying, look, you know, I've done a cursory energy management strategy. I've even gone down the road of getting my own interval data. And I've said, you know something, the majority of my loads are during the day. So what happens? Step one, commercial customer contacts or is contacted by the renewable energy company. Ideally us, but whatever. The commercial customer obviously has a good idea what their electrical expenditure is from their bills. The renewable energy company asks for their electricity bills for at least a year. So we do want to see what your bills are initially. And this is before we've done any interval data analysis, because what we do next is what's called a preliminary costing. So we look at your average daily load and we go, okay, Joe's bulbs in Wandong, they've got 250 kilowatt hour a day load. 60% of that load is during daylight hours. We've made a guesstimation on that. We haven't got the interval data yet because we know what a nursery sort of does. And they have a roof profile or ground area, and we can put on this size system. So we present a preliminary costing. In the early days, we used to do a formal costing, but this is very, very time consuming. And, you know, a lot of the times the customer goes, well, no, I don't want to go down that road. So what we do, we send out a preliminary costing based on just your electricity bills for the last year, and it is used to separate the wheat from the chaff, which is a pretty old expression. But it allows us to go, oh yeah, the customer's interested in progressing once we give a figure, as opposed to spending a lot of time, a lot of man hours putting together a full proposal only for the customer to say, nah, not interested. It's too bloody expensive.
Give you a cost estimate purely so you know exactly sort of what the financial investment is. Solar, depending on if it's 10 kilowatt systems up to 100, up to 400, up to a megawatt. We see the systems as a large real hardcore investment, for lack of a better word, for your company. It's a big deal. It's a lot of money. So we give an initial cost estimate, and we can see that through the power bill, through usually what your peak usage is and off peak and stuff like that, to get a gauge as to when you're using your energy. That's got a fairly quick turnaround. We'll give you some preliminary details. More than happy to do, which we need to do as a site visit as well. So I can come out and physically see if, as what Veli alluded to, if roof or ground mount systems are the way to go. We haven't touched on it at all, but we also do battery and the hybrid systems and off-grid systems as well that we will get to at a point. But we're not pigeonholed into one definition of what the industry is, because everyone is in-house and we've got 35 people working under the same roof. Not in today's era of COVID, of course, everyone's either working from home or working from a safe distance. We've got a real lateral way of thinking about things, that there's no challenge too big or too small. I know Eddie, who's our director, is just fiercely passionate about just having a crack and coming up with an idea. So if you've got an idea of how potentially we can help you, please let us know. There's nothing too big or too small or too hard. Basically, we look at everything. we've done a lot of projects like that that, you know, start off too outlandishly, you know, crazy, for lack of a better definition, and through engineering and design process and, you know, our chief A grades getting involved, we've been able to come up with ways to make the system, but forget about the system. System's one component. It's the money that we've saved them. That's the big thing, is the solar, you know, as a viable alternative to rapidly and drastically cut your energy costs. Like we guarantee it. We guarantee that we can help, you know, lower that as a cost for you guys. We can go through some data and some numbers in a little bit when we're up to that part in the slide.
Look, it's an interesting thing that Andrei mentioned about the energy storage. At this point in time, energy storage is still fairly expensive, but again, it's a cost-benefit situation. And I'll give you a case study scenario. Tomato growers in South Australia are experiencing incredibly high temperatures, hydroponically grown, soilless media. So the capacity of their growing media is really limited in regards to coping with a loss of energy from an HVAC and air conditioning and irrigation point of view. But they've been able to get around that with the use of a backup diesel generator, which can start if the grid fails. There's an automatic transfer switch or manual. I wouldn't suggest that, an automatic transfer switch, and it switches over, and after 10, 15 seconds, the generator starts up and the loads can be serviced. Now, in most cases, that is enough, but I'll go the real extreme and say a medicinal cannabis grower where they're using an aeroponic system for their cuttings, and the actual root zone is being constantly inundated with fog, the right humidity, hydroponically grown. They cannot, in certain situations, have any loss in power for any shape and for any length of time. So the issue with a generator is that when a generator starts up, it can't service the load straight away. It has to go boom, 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 and then comes up, and then sorry about the sound effects. Then it actually addresses those loads. Whereas an energy storage component instantaneously can take over those loads. And a lot of systems that we've designed have been a smaller energy battery storage component to take care of that small time period in between when the grid fails and when the generator actually comes online. So again, it's a cost-benefit situation, but batteries, it's a complicated area, and I'm unwilling, I'm not willing really to expand on it in this particular forum. It's like a presentation in itself, and again, it's on a case-by-case basis. So I'll continue on. So step 3, if you're interested, after the preliminary proposal, then we go to site and we look at specific information. So we look at where your switchboard is and all the in-depth analysis.
Cable runs and where you're going to go. Also to check out your switchboard as well to ensure that, the system can integrate. So it's a component of what solar is grid connection as well. So all of the distributors in the network that we talked about, AusNet and PowerCore and all these guys, they have stringent rules on what is allowed and what is idea versus actual reality as well. You can't just put a 100 kilowatt system on the roof and plug it in and see you later. The first component is the grid application, which really goes through once we've reached the stage of with going with the solar as a renewable energy source, is to ensure that through Grid Connect, which what Dave handles here at Greenwood, is to make sure that it will be able to handle the load. There's not to do with us, and I'm not going to can anyone specifically because that's not needed, but there's been systems put on roofs that are 250 odd kilowatts in size that they haven't had grid applications put in, and they can't turn the system on. They can't do it. They can't use the energy. It's a can of worms that, not through being diligent, and that's where we pride ourselves on being ISO, that our management systems and health and safety and stuff is so regimented that we follow a strict policy and a strict guideline and plan to ensure that we get the right, the right strategy involved as to how we're going to integrate this into your business.
Yeah, it's a case of following a procedure. Look, and I think we've been throwing around these terms a little bit too. Like Andrei said, 100 kilowatt. What does that mean? And some of you say, look, I know exactly what you're talking about. Others are going, well, what the heck is 100 kilowatt? So each panel that we use is around about, say, 300 to 400 watts each, and they're about 2 metres by 1 metre wide, 2 metres long, 1 metre wide. So 100 kilowatt would be around about how many panels?
250 panels.
250
Generally,
panels.
if you use a 400 watt panel, panels are like computer technology that the 20 years ago, Veli would know far better than me. A panel that's 100 watt might have cost 10 grand or something like that.
Yes.
Same with like a 1 terabyte hard drive 10 years ago might have cost $600. Eddie, our director here, has got a 1 terabyte key ring on his keys for his house. It's like that with panels. That panel technology and panels in general have slowed, I suppose, in terms of the technology, but in terms of bang for your buck, it's a brilliant time to invest purely because of the return on investment, which is quick. Batteries are coming down, regularly. The technology is profound. They're accurate. They work. They're reliable as well. So the time to invest in solar is now. We'll deal with it down the track, but it's a competitive advantage too for yourself versus someone else in the industry, because you're saving money on a cost that you can control. It's
look, it's really important that things are done correctly. And as I said, look, there's always a prudent approach to everything that we do, and again, cost benefit. And a case in point is that in most cases we do put solar on roofs because there is a structure there. And in a greenhouse situation, obviously we're not putting it on top of the greenhouse, but we put it on the packing shed, the potting up shed, the propagation shed, or it will be a ground mount. But from a business owner's perspective, again, as I mentioned before, every square metre is worth X amount. And you may say, okay, that land there, it's perfect, fantastic, definitely put you a ground mount system there because we don't have available roof structure. Or you may say, something, I may not put the ground mount system there, I'll put it over here because that's where I'm going to actually expand and put another nursery. So you have to do those sums yourself, like we do the sums in business to make sure that we come up with the. We can advise as well on site as to what we see fit to put it. Obviously, if it's your business, but we can give advice as to roof mount, ground mount, and where the location of the panels is. Not every roof's perfect in terms of the direction on compass as to where it's headed. But we've seen it all as Greenwood to be able to give good advice. We have seen it all. So that's what that horrible interval data looks like. So we generally ask the customer to sign an authority to act document. In the early days, we asked the customer to get their own interval data, but hey, you're busy. And in more times than not, we didn't get a response. It's like, and we don't want to ring up and go, hey, have you got that interval data yet? So we send an authority to act with all the things that we can fill out, and then we get your signature, and then we send that off to the retailer and basically says, please, kind sir, can you give me the interval data for Joe's plants at Wandong? I think it was Joe's plants, wasn't it? Joe's plants at Wandong, and they say, yes, sir, and straight away they give it to us in the ideal world. Or 1 month later, we're still waiting, and everything in between, just depends. Most of them are pretty good. Yeah, they're pretty sharp. Yeah. They've got their own forms that we need to fill out as well. They're more than happy to play with. We partner, well, not so much partner, but we have really good relationships with all of the distributors in the network and the retailers too. We're very efficient in timeframes of doing stuff. Yeah, we don't want to bite the hand. Look, at the end of the day, we are putting a system onto the distributor's infrastructure as well. So we have to make sure we do everything right. So, okay, we make a request, get the interval data, and then we load this lovely interval data in CSV format. We load it into the solar design tool, and we start playing around. And obviously our design is tempered by the physicality of the roof and the actual load profile or the available ground area for a ground mount system. And we have to look at this we have to look at it from a financial point of view. And sometimes pointing the panels all facing towards the north is not the best way to go. Remember, we are trying to match the site loads, how much you're using per day, when you're using those loads, when the solar output sits at its optimum, and the fact that any excess, excuse me, goes back to the grid at the 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So we're juggling all of these things to come up with the right design.
So an example would be in that situation, like if your loads are in the afternoon between say 2 and 5 or something like that, you'd lean towards looking at almost like a westerly northwest sort of panel array, purely so you can pick up that afternoon sun on the panel. If the panel itself was facing east, for example, then yeah, whoever's installing the system potentially, if it's not avoidable, will be doing an injustice to your system because it's not going to perform as well as it needs to.
It's true, and what Andrei said, but sometimes to actually optimise the direction, the extra cost involved negates the benefit of the increased production, because at the end of the day, this is a financial decision. And from our experience, most of these commercial systems that we're doing, best case scenario, 3 years payback. Most of the time it's between 4 and 4.5 years payback of the system.
Depending on the size of how big it is.
Yeah, depending, and of course the actual site data when the actual loads are happening. Again, this is a financial decision. That is the main driver of any business adopting commercial solar. So the next step, there's 7 constraints: the size of the roof, or how much land, how much electricity has been consumed, how much it costs when it's been consumed, access to finance. Obviously, pros and cons, do you cost-benefit analysis, customer's budget and the customer's expectations. See, I personally don't see it as an investment. I see it as utilising an existing resource to reduce expenditure on something that you have to spend money on, being electricity, and this allows you to spend money in other areas to improve your business, whether it's horticulture, whether it's cold storage, whatever the case. It is just methodically going through those options. Site visit required, as we mentioned before. We collect all the details, and as Andrei mentioned, where's the main switchboard, where are we going to put our gear, where the inverter is going to be. I mean, we want to make things look aesthetically pleasing as well. It may be, electrical stuff, but it can't look, it should look good as well. Because we do a lot of testing of other people's work, we have seen some absolute abominations in this area, and our guys really pride themselves in trying to make things look aesthetically pleasing because,
We have the highest standards. If we toot our own whistle here for a bit or
we've been doing that a bit.
Yeah, to have contracts with some large companies, you've got to have the highest craftsmanship and work, to keep those contracts and to keep them serviced and happy. Through my expertise and knowledge of dealing with these companies as account director, is the biggest single factor that I find with solar systems is who do you trust is a big one, is how do you trust them? By being all in-house and being able to, design, procure, engineer, install, and as I've talked about multiple times already, it gives absolute peace of mind that, everything is in our control as well. The other thing as well with the next step of how it all works is integration on your site, so it doesn't affect your business. So, there's EWPs, scissor lifts, there's, drills, there's ladders, there's people on site. We talk to you about how that can work seamlessly with your business, and especially if you're in a retail environment where people are coming into your nurseries and stuff like that. We can accommodate, we can figure out a way that everyone works, harmoniously, so we don't affect your overall business, which is huge. Yeah,
the last thing you want to do is impede the business process, and that's why with any solar installation, you're minimising any downtime. In fact, there's no downtime. The system gets turned off once before we make the connection. It usually happens at the ungodly hour, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because we do a lot of work for distribution centres and things like that, where you want to minimise shutdown times. So it does not impact in any way, shape or form the running of your business. So, okay, so we got the logistics. So we've done the site visit, collected all the information, and now we start putting down the proposal and we look at the secondary protection, and we won't go into the details, but effectively, because we are connecting to the distributors' poles and wires, we have to ask them permission, and that's through a grid application process, which we do ourselves in-house, and we also make the secondary protection board. So we're asking, for instance, up where I am, it's AusNet. We say, please, Mr. or Mrs. AusNet, can we put this system on? And they go, yes, yes. And they tick the box because we've ticked all the correct boxes, but we do have to ask their permission. By law, they have to accept a system on their network as long as we've abided by all the appropriate Australian standards, which is what we do. So, but it is a process, and it can take, worst case scenario, it can take about 2 months from the day we submit the application. And what we've found too is don't make mistakes on that application, because otherwise they put it at the bottom of the pile. Lucky for us, one of our ex-employees works at one of the distributors as a renewable energy engineer. So that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, it's nice to do business with people we actually know and like. Okay, next thing. If it's all good, the customer says, yay, accepts the proposals, we start throwing confetti because we're really happy. We ask for deposit, and here the process starts from there. So we make an application to the electricity distributor, and we give them all the details. They have to accept it, as I mentioned, and they tick everything off. And again, we throw confetti because we're really happy. It's great. Now, step 3, we put together the grid application side of things. So that involves us doing CAD drawings and all these nitty-gritty calculation, bolt rise calculations, because there's a lot of electrical stipulations, and as we are dealing with electricity, we are dealing with probably about 20 different Australian standards that basically have direction within them, shall. So you shall do this, you shall do that, you shall use this cable, you shall not have a volt rise of more than 2% over a particular run. So a whole host of information. And this is a service we offer other installers as well, because it's a pretty convoluted one, but luckily we've got some pretty smart guys and girls doing that stuff. So yeah, we're pretty au fait with all of that. So the distributor says yes, as I said before, yay, confetti, and then we organise the installation. So the project management timeline is determined, and all of those things that any sort of kind of construction. Now, because we're doing solar, we're not talking about the restrictions, like for instance of a new building. There's no permits involved and things like that. It's quite easy. It's more ticking the boxes electrically that we've done everything right, the distributor's happy, and off we go. Materials are organised, we lock in delivery dates, personnel is organised, all the drawings are constructed. Standard stuff, but you'd be surprised how many businesses don't do this. We decided to go down the road of, and Andrei's mentioned a couple of the ISO accreditation, International Standards Organisation, and we have that for management, environmental and OH&S. And that really helped us also streamline our processes. We thought we were doing quite well, but when we got the ISO specialists to come in and help us, we went, wow, we can really improve. And it's, as a result, every facet of our business has improved. Because with these jobs, they're fairly large and a few people are involved. So if you're not well organised, there's some real problems. And I know from experience in doing the training, I get a lot of installation companies say, look, we buggered up our first job because we didn't realise there was $15,000 of hidden costs. There went their profit. Okay, so let you in on a little secret there. Okay, so site work start. We produce milestone reports if the project's going on. This is on the really big projects. Works are completed, system is commissioned, final payment is made. Let's talk about an actual case study. And this is Mansfield's, who we know and love. You may have seen the opening photo. Beautiful, clean greenhouse. I've seen quite a few horticultural businesses. They can vary from just shambles up until, disinfect yourself before you walk into this greenhouse. Especially the medicinal cannabis grows. They are unbelievably stringent on what their requirements are. But anyway, Mansfield's, I think I'll let Andrei take over on this one, and maybe I can flick through on the slides.
Yeah, we can go through it together. That's easy. So Mansfield's is one of our partners in terms of the agri-industry and with a long-standing partnership with Matt and the whole Mansfield's family. Yeah, we were provided an opportunity to go and present and see exactly what the feasibility is of putting solar on their roof via looking at renewable energy strategies and stuff like that. So as the slide indicates, 100 kilowatts is what we could put on the roof, which would be a viable system to be able to handle their daytime loads. So site visits were inspected. We're agnostic in terms of what actual materials and inverters that we use. So panels and stuff like that. We're using this. Too bad. We talk to you about what is the best, possible, manufacturer of panel or inverter that suits your roof space or your business. So that's the first thing. So depending on the size of the business, 100 kilowatt system, give or take, should cost versus what we see as a market sort of average at about $125,000, give or take. These are round figure numbers with an asterisk saying subject to site inspection and cable runs and all that sort of stuff. But that's a general roof 100 kilowatt system is based at around that sort of price point. You'll hear in the industry the talk is like on dollars per watts and stuff like that as well. So that's just a shortcut abbreviation of the whole system. So $1.25 a watt equals, if it's a 100 kilowatt system, $125,000. So just so you sort of wrap your head around how that all works. We can go into that in a separate conversation. So the next slide comes up and we see what we've got. We look at their bill, and so the process has been that we've acquired their interval data, we've pumped it into PV Cell to have a look exactly how it works. So there's no speculation. This is all accurate. So their billage is around sort of $48,000 per year. That's what they were spending, or they continue at this stage to spend on power. We, through a 100 kilowatt system, modelled it so we could basically shave 47% of the system in terms of how much energy they're using. So we've saved them almost half on what their energy bills will be. I say it to myself daily. I'm like, every single company, we're using electricity right now. So are you. Everyone uses electricity. How we go about getting it is up to us. Now, Mansfield's invested in this. We basically have partnered a year after the fact. The system has now been in for about over a year and a half, almost 2 years now. They're saving, 50% almost of their energy bills. Now, you can do two things with that. You can reinvest it into your business. You can, I suppose, just keep it in your wallet for a rainy day, especially with COVID stuff on at the moment. It's the way it is. But they've saved, $22,000. Solar is a long-term investment / strategy, as what Veli said. It's not an investment. Investment is something that you get back in 20 years' time. I'm going to invest in stocks in an up-and-coming, tech company out of Silicon Valley. Go Andrei. And 20 years down the track, I might make millions off it. But not going to happen. But you get my point. Solar is an instant sort of financial gain. $20,000 a year with spike of energy costs going up and demand charges changing and all of these hidden fees, the benefit of what they're going to get, after I wrote it down, that after 10 years, they potentially will have saved around $250,000 off their energy bill. And after 20 years, it's $500,000. You can see on that slide that after 25 years, it's over $600,000 they will have saved by accepting solar as a platform for reducing their energy wastage. And that's profits that they've already put back into their business. So they are using the monies that they are saving through the solar to reinvest in more machinery, more automation, a better customer experience, a quicker turnaround on products from order to pack to send out. It's an advantage for them. But I've spoken to Matt, about it in the past, that they're educating their team on what renewable energy is, and I get a kick out of that. I've got a 5-year-old son, Reed, at home, and I often talk to him about renewables as what it is, and it's funny that we forget that by putting solar on the roof, yes, it's a massive financial advantage, but it's also doing the right thing by taking control of some of your energy costs for your business. You can control it for many, many years, and on average, the rate of electricity goes up around 5% each year, and then 5% for the first year, then 3% onwards and onwards. You're paying 25 cents to the kilowatt hour today. I guarantee, I bet my house on it, that you're not going to be spending 25 cents to the kilowatt hour in 6 years' time. I'd bet my house on it. I'm that confident. It's on film, because that's just the natural rate, and we see it. We see it daily in residential homes. My power bills have gone up, been slugged because of demand charges, etc. Take back control of what you can, and we're here to help. We can offer advice, we can install. So that's just It's also the payback period, that a system of around sort of $120,000 will pay itself back in 5 years.
Well, I'll interrupt for a sec. This particular example is at 20 degrees, right? And in the actual installation was a while ago. And again, panels have come down. So now most of the systems seem to be paying up around between 4 and 4.5 years. But I just wanted to show the participants that at 20 degrees, there's your payback. And I want you to watch the next slide. See how we've lowered the panels in this situation.
Degree, yeah.
So instead of being like that, they've come down a bit, and then you can see the system payback has just increased a little bit more. And east facing, see how we've gone. So I'll go back. That's north facing, 20 degrees, north facing, 10 degrees, east facing. See how at 10 degrees, see how the system has increased, because obviously the interval data, right, suggests that an east facing situation wasn't the best for a payback period at 10 degrees. Now, watch the next one. West facing, even worse, 5.7 years. So this is why you have to financially model these systems. We're at the sort of the tail end, and I think we've done pretty well, because we said we were about 2 hours and we've got 20 minutes. So
yeah, we appreciate your time.
Yeah, I've got a series of questions that I've asked myself and I've answered myself, but please feel free to type some questions in, or even speak to us after this. So these are some of the most frequently asked questions. Are there any additional benefits to installing solar apart from reduction in electricity expenses? I'm glad you asked. This is interesting, because in a roof mount, this is not applicable in a ground mount situation, but in a roof mount situation, because you're effectively putting a thermal shield, the panel acts as a thermal shield between the sun and your roof. You will actually experience, best case scenario, a reduction in your HVAC expenses, because your roof is not getting as hot. So it's a really interesting one that not many companies have experienced, and there's been a bit of research in this area in America and Germany, which I've looked at. Now, what kind of maintenance does a solar system require? Look, apart from occasional cleaning the panels, we recommend a complete system check every year. Now, the cleaning of the panels is an interesting one. We did a job in Mildura, and for the people who know, there's a lot of red earth, fine red earth. Not that quality red earth in Silver and Monbulk area. This is like a much finer, like bull dust, I think it's called. And the panels required a lot more maintenance, and because it was in Mildura, in the end, we, from a cleaning perspective, engaged a local contractor to clean the panels on a regular basis. But down in anywhere else, effectively in Melbourne, you're looking at, a once a year situation. Now, does my system need to be monitored? Look, we do recommend monitoring so we can optimise the output through further analysis. Businesses change, more equipment comes online, sometimes pumping regimes change, new greenhouses get installed, better HVAC systems get installed, new heating beds, the whole bit. So it's interesting to see what happens through these changes through analysis. So it's something that we recommend. Will I have a power bill after installing solar? Look, yes. Unless the export of excessive solar negates the fixed cost of the service charge. Remember I mentioned before that $1.50, $1.60, whatever it is per day, that fixed charge for having electricity connected to your property. Solar can't directly negate it. It can indirectly through, yes, I'm sending out excess solar at 9 cents. But remember, we want to minimise that, don't we? We want to try to consume as much of the solar on site as we possibly can, because it's worth 25 cents per kilowatt hour, or whatever you're paying on your bill. Will I need to apply to a council for my solar system? Not for a roof mount, but for ground mounts, that's sometimes a possibility. Can systems be financed? Yeah, look, finance is available via obviously your own avenues or specialised solar lender brokers. And this is an area where ideally, if you are borrowing, you are cash positive right from the word go. That's in the ideal world. And we have done some systems which have been cash positive right from the word go.
It's the aim of the game if you do use finance.
Absolutely.
So we have third-party finance brokers that we've used in the past for many of our partners, called Solaris Finance. Nothing to do with Greenwood. They're just a mob that work exclusively in the renewable sector for giving people opportunities to use solar and stuff like that as a form of finance, so to speak. So, yeah, we can put you instead with people that that can help with your decision making as well.
So, how long does the installation start? How long are the guys on site doing the works? Look, depends on the size of the system. Usually around 2 or more weeks for a commercial system. Obviously, as I said, depends on the size.
100 kilowatt would say 2 weeks would be safe bet. That's what we usually take.
Yeah, that's what we like. Yeah. Will the installation affect my ability to operate my business? No, and this is really important. So, as a reputable renewable energy company, we're aware that disruption to customers' business is not a desirable outcome, and therefore this is minimised. And as I said, when the final connection is made to the actual network, it happens at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And for the young guys on site, maybe, I don't know. I always feel sorry for the guys when they go that early, but it has to be done. And that's what we do. We generally pick these times way outside of business hours. And the electricity gets shut off for maybe half an hour to an hour, depending on how big and complex the system is. How will a commercial solar system benefit my business? Okay, well, we've talked about that for the last half of this presentation. Decreased running costs, reduction in HVAC costs, increased asset value of business, environmental credentials from a marketing perspective, and a whole host of other things that I haven't listed. Can I structure my finance payments so they are less than the original electricity bills pre-solar? In other words, cash positive. Yeah, this is a possibility, and obviously requires further conversations with us, a financial specialist, and it depends on site specifics. Not all sites are going to be cash positive right from the day go, but a good percentage are. Now, what if my roof doesn't face north? This is really not a problem Commercial solar systems designed to minimise investment payback periods based on all the available data. And east-west panel configurations can be the best options. And I think we did it for the place out at Sylvan, the Bold place, De Jongs. Oh, sorry. Yeah, he'll be fine. Yours won't mind. So yeah, because the actual building structure was orientated in such a way that I think we did east, west and north on tilt, didn't we? It was a bit of an interesting one.
Yeah, we adapted.
We adapted, so. How long will my commercial solar system last? With the panels around 30 years, now the oldest solar panels in Australia are still operating and they're about 40 years old. So they drop off after about 25, 30 years. They lose probably about 10%, I'd say. But this is
as an average.
As an average, and this is calculated in our estimations of the dollars saved. Inverters are guaranteed for 10 years, and we tend to exclusively use an Austrian-made inverter. Now, the cost of the replacement of that inverter, this is where we speculate. At the rate of change of electronic equipment, I'd be saying that when you go to change the inverter in 10 years' time, the cost will probably be a fifth, based on Moore's law. So the inverter is something that will be replaced after 10 years. The panels, no, because the only thing that moves in panels is the electrons, and that's the tech joke we like to play around with. So how do I sell my excess power, and does my retailer pay? So there's a bidirectional meter is installed, and this shows any excess solar going out to the grid, and this is credited to your account. And your specific retailer has, has different ways of dealing with this. But at this point in time, you'll get 9 cents per kilowatt hour outputted back to the grid. Will my business still require energy from the grid? And we've answered that. Yes, outside of daylight hours, unless energy storage is also incorporated, yes, you will. Will I have power during a blackout? We answered this before. No, unless energy storage is part of the system design. We've sort of come to the end.
So we've touched base on our presentation. For all those involved, if you have any questions now, regardless of the presentation or anything to do with renewables, please don't hesitate to shoot us a Zoom group chat message. We'll get back to you straight away. So we'll just give a couple of minutes just for those that have any questions. You're more than welcome as well. Take down my mobile number, which is 0414 62 3128. I'm here to help. We're here, to give you guys every opportunity to invest in renewables and solar as a platform. Give us a call, send me an email, here to help.
It's funny, from our perspective, it's bleeding obvious to go down the road of solar.
Especially for the agri-industry.
Yeah, especially for the agri-industry, where predominantly their loads are falling within solar production hours. So we've got this wonderful ball of energy in the sky that's, shooting down its rays every day, and why aren't we using it more effectively? And now, because panels have come down so incredibly cheaply compared to when I started back in 2002, and panels were, I think, over $10 per watt, and now they're around about 60 to 70 cents per watt. So that shows you in that time frame how radically they've come down in price. They've sort of reached their point where they won't really go down any further, because I'm surprised how cheap they are now. It's got a lot to do with economies of scale, etc. But to negate a percentage of your electricity bill, or all of it, it really is the smart way to go. But I will say this: if you can reduce your consumption overall without impeding any productive process on your business, that's a good thing to do. Now, Andrei mentioned his mobile. I won't. I mean, I'm sure Lizzie will hand out our details and our email, and my email's got my mobile number on it. We are, as Andrei said, here to help. Do the sums, be prudent in your approach to business, as I'm sure you are, and you'll probably see that the commercial solar side of things is a pretty attractive one. I do want to stress, though, please do it. Start some kind of energy management strategy on your business, even if it's really basic, looking at those, continuous intermittent loads, daytime, nighttime ratios, office versus nursery, and you'll be surprised where you can make some savings. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, now, Lizzie, are you still there?
I am still here.
Yeah. Because we can see the NGIV logo up.
The share.
And,
yep. Cool. Yep.
Yeah. So
here we go. Well, thank you so much for that. That was really interesting. I know I sat here trying to find my energy bills, trying to figure out where I could save. So no, that's good. I'm not sure if there's any questions from Charles or Paul. I did have some apologies as a few people dropped off because they had other meetings. So I'm happy to share for those that are here or interested your presentation and your contact details as well in case anyone wants to get in contact with you directly. So yes, thank you so much. I don't think, have you seen any more questions come through? I haven't seen any. Did my questions come through? Not to me, Paul. Who'd you send them to?
No, I see it now, so that's all right. I'm just reading it now.
Oh, you've got it?
AEIP fund still available. I'm really interested in water power turbines as I've constantly flown creek running past my property. Is this something you've had experience with or offer? Did my questions come through?
Your question did come through.
So we got a poll, so yeah, cheers. So we're good there. So the AEIP fund, the Agri Fund as a whole has come to an end from talking with Emily at Agri Victoria about basically getting the monies from them to be able to do this. You can still organise an energy audit from memory, but if you haven't done that already, then you're non-eligible to actually physically be a component of that fund, so to speak. Whether or not they open it up in future is completely up to them. We're not affiliated at all with them. But yeah, we're in regular contact with them on that. In relation to the...
I'll answer that. So we're talking, Paul, we're talking about microhydro, aren't we? Yeah, so that is it's the most beautiful form of renewable energy, especially if you've got a creek that is not ephemeral, it is continuous. You're talking 24/7 power. Yeah, this is something that we'd definitely like to chat more about. It's a specialised area, but yeah, we love these kinds of projects. So yeah, definitely that's something we can.
So I've been to your nursery, Paul. So I can go through it with Veli and see exactly. Yeah, I've even got photos I think on our database of your existing infrastructure and stuff like that. So yeah, we can definitely talk internally about that. That's one of those projects that really is right up Greenwood's alley. That nothing's too hard, nothing's too easy. We'll give it a crack. We'll have a look. We'll see exactly how we can help.
No worries. You're still there, Lizzie, aren't you?
I am. Sorry, I was just muting myself while I was typing. Thank you, Charles, for that note. You've sent me an email address, but also something which I've flicked onto you, Paul, in regards to someone, now his name is Paul Cruz, has some interest in water gen tech. So feel free to have a look at that, see how you go. Cool.
All right, so yeah, we appreciate the opportunity and yeah, have a great day.
Vortex is another one. Thank you, Charles. This is good. He's going to keep flicking me names. I'll keep flicking them to you, Paul. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And no doubt we'll see you all again soon. So thank you, Veli and Andrei. Hopefully we'll be able to do this in a few months' time in real life.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. And David says goodbye as well. He's also on a phone call in the background. So anyway, cheers, everyone. Have a good day. All right, bye.